What if I told you that in 2006, while Naruto was hiding his feelings,
So meant for each other.
We have to play it off, okay?
and Ichigo was about to have Genjo behind him like,
It's like that born no.
there was a new type of anime that was sneaking up behind everyone. Back in my day, gag anime had a kind of mixed reception, partly because of the subjectivity of comedy and partly because of the hype of the big three and shonen anime's increase in popularity. Cause what makes one person shit themselves with laughter can leave another person in the same room with a deadpan face the whole time. But anime like that have been—
Shut up, this one's different.
This period in anime history I'm talking about was before the rise of isekai. Unlike other moments of mainstream media, shonen anime was doing everything right. It was giving us dreams, introducing us to various amazing worlds, and showing us different power systems. And it was doing all this by following a blueprint that we honestly actually knew very well. But in the shadows of the big three, there was one shonen that was always a threat. A shonen story that went from looking like a gag anime to being one of the best battle shonen of that decade. A show that had time travel, magic fire rings, male nudity, and gripping tension that holds onto you for entire arcs, and even character interactions that rival the best shows. This story was Katekyo Hitman Reborn. Talking about Reborn like this isn't some sort of revisionist history. Akira Amano, the mangaka of Hitman Reborn, was actually listed as one of the top 12 richest mangaka in 2011, which was right after the anime ended. Even though she's worked on other shows and has even done designs for Psycho Pass, she's not different from all the other creators. Each creator has their magnum opus, the show that they love that they will be remembered for, and for Amano, that was the story of Sawada Tsunayoshi, a middle schooler that's probably below average in every part of his life. He has no friends, no hoes, no money, and terrible grades. All he does is wake up, go to school, and admire his crush from afar. In his first introduction, Tsuno wakes up to his mom telling him about the tutor. He whines and finally gets up, wiping the crust off his eyes, and then ends up falling down the stairs to a baby staring down at him. It's his new tutor, Reborn. Now, we had already seen this guy before. He was on the other side of the world in a bar in Italy pointing a gun at someone. So after shouting for a bit, he runs to school, gets dragged by a dog, sees his crush, gets shot by a bullet, confesses, and then somehow ends up getting challenged to a kendo fight. From here on, whenever Tsuno needs to do something but is too wimpy to actually commit, there's a process he goes through. It starts with a bullet to the head, and after he gets shot, he loses his clothes and then gets angry. But this is kind of a good thing for him because he actually tries to do what he was too scared to try earlier. You know that girl you saw at the party last week that you wanted to talk to but couldn't because, anime pickup lines don't work? This would probably have been good for you. But since everyone knew what kind of person Tsuno was, the current head of the Vongola family sent Reborn on a mission to groom to teach Tuna how to become a mafia boss. And the best way was by shooting him. So Reborn has this thing called dying will bullets that are able to revive someone with the regret they had before dying, and it helps them overcome that regret. It gives a whole new meaning to power-ups because when it comes to shonen itself as a genre, after watching or reading at least 5 of them, you sort of get introduced to almost every cliche that exists. Mentor character, training arc, power-ups, absent dad that's a badass, tournament arc. Reborn has almost all these shonen tropes, but it tries to be a bit different. But maybe the biggest difference is that it didn't have the monster within trope and barely any fan service. The shonen mafia story might as well be as fire as shonen shinigami or pirates because it's all in the execution. And to be honest, Reborn didn't do every single thing right, but it found where it belonged next to all these powerhouses and just made a name for itself primarily because of how good the character writing was. Seeing how each person had a distinct and interesting relationship with everyone else was kind of fun. Like this lady Bianchi hated everyone, but when Reborn showed up, she immediately became a trad wife.
Everybody I know who's married right now, they're married to broke ass.
As far as the story goes, the bare bones are just a teenage guy wakes up one day and realizes his life is gonna change because he's been chosen, but he made it clear he didn't want to lead the mafia. Tuna made it very clear that he didn't want any of that. I don't know if you're hearing me. Tuna legit hated the thought of being in the mafia. And I don't know if I mentioned, but Tuna did not want to be in the mafia. Shonen protagonists will sometimes start the series by saying something about being a certain way and they may end up changing by the end. Like Tuna from the start was a bum, and by the end, after all the battles and trials, after going to the future and training, was still a bum. He was a reactive character that waited for the story to move him. And that's not really a bad thing. Despite him still being a crybaby by the end, he was a crybaby who didn't want the dangers that were coming for him to affect his friends. Initially, Tuna just wanted to make friends, go to school, win the girl of his dreams, graduate with a bachelor's degree, and end up with an amazing job pushing carts at Walmart because even though Tuna was a crybaby and a bum, I don't know if I mentioned this, but Tuna was hella dumb. It reminds me of someone I tutored once who took a minute to tell me what 5 times 2 was, and then he almost passed out when I said, okay, here's a tough one. Now it's 2 times 5. So yeah, Even though Tuna did not want to be the head of a mafia family, the stress that came with it changed his life for the better. He made new friends, and in the process he got close to his crush and even had a girl from a different school fall for him, and he got stronger as well. Hold on, you know how fucking cold that is? Haru, that's her name by the way, saw Tuna in underwear running around and was like, that's the man I want. She must have seen something. Haru ended up being one of the people that was always in Tuna's overcrowded house along with the entire cast of characters. And one of those people who ended up in his house for a brief period was Irie Sorichi, the man that would change the future. See, Sorichi had a little bit of a problem. He was even more of a wimp than Tuna, but he was actually smart. He was observant because he hardly ever talked to people, and if he wasn't building a multi-purpose robot, he was talking to himself. During his time in college, he met a guy called Byakuran that would end up casually introducing us to the multiverse in this anime. Byakuran was a cool looking dude with eye tattoos that was always smiling. He was narcissistic and a trickster, but he was the type of person to ask you to do something that he's already got covered just for the fun of it. The thing about Byakuran that made him different was that he was able to interact with himself from other worlds, and using that knowledge he was able to conquer those worlds. But he was only able to achieve part of his goal because he kept meeting Irie. Byakuran is a villain that smiles with his eyes closed, and if you know anime, you probably know that if the fucker smiles with his eyes closed, do not trust him.
These donuts are great! Jelly-filled are my favorite!
This man had seen many futures and conquered different worlds, but still needed people he considered dumb and weak to achieve his true goal. Now that I think about it, this anime, despite being about the mafia, was about loyalty and what it means to choose your king. And that king was Tuna. Hitman Reborn aired at a time when main characters like Luffy, Lelouch, Light, Ichigo, and Naruto were shouting or scheming their way to greatness, and it made Tuna feel like an outcast because he was completely different from them in his everyday life. And Reborn, who was his tutor, was actually a mean little piece of shit. But he showed us who Tuna really was under all that whining and crying, and he opened up the world for both us and the cast. The show may not have started with a crazy first arc where Tuna immediately unlocks powers and becomes a force of nature, but it started off as a slice of life. And you know what? I can come up to you today and tell you I rewatch Hitman Reborn at least once a year along with Saiki K, but it wasn't always one of my favorites. I actually really hated the daily life arc when I first saw it. I know, right? Oh, shocking. It used to really piss me off because where were the hype entrances? Where were the moments of the MC getting pissed because they were too weak? Where was the antagonist that we had to defeat in the first arc that would somehow be relevant for the entire series? So many things were missing for me at the time, and instead we got shenanigans with poison cooking, half-naked Tuna, crying Lambo, and just a house that was too damn overcrowded. But when I pushed through and got further in the series, it hit every point I was looking forward to, and even some I didn't know I'd like. There was the Varia arc that was basically a tournament arc during after school hours hosted by the Mafia, and even a future arc that showed us new ways to use the powers we already saw earlier, and cooler versions of the characters we know, like Hitman Reborn just kept pushing out constant heat. And now that I love these guys, watching that first stretch of episodes is like comfort food. All the little interactions that go on in later episodes have their roots planted from this first arc. Now, maybe I'm making this video to tell you to watch Reborn, or maybe I just had some time in my hands and I thought a nice yapping session about Reborn would be good. But if you take anything away from this video, let it be that Reborn still holds up strongly to this day. You know how I know? It's because I can still feel the tension in the serious arcs when I rewatch the series, even though I know how it all ends. Imagine knowing spoilers about something and still having that feeling of anxiety when the characters are in a rough spot. Thing is, we always know the main characters have a 95 or 99% chance of survival, but the beauty of the story lies in how they survive. And me personally, I'm a big fan of explanations. If you yap enough, you better be telling me something that makes sense. If a character has an insane entrance to save people, it better have been something we expected because the situation was set up beforehand, and Reborn excels at stuff like that. It also helps that there are a lot of characters that are supposed to be helpful that are just very useless in certain moments. Dino, for example, was one of Tuna's first teachers and his big brother in the Mafia. He's also one of the strongest guys on their side. But if Dino doesn't have his followers around him, you might be better off with regular Tuna. He's even more useless than him. So what happens when during a fight Dino shows up and doesn't have anyone with him? Yeah, it was a fire entrance, but the situation didn't get any better. It makes for a funny gag, yeah, but it still manages to keep the tension when the silence hits because they actually still really need help. Reborn at the time didn't have the type of fight choreography we're seeing in Bleach or Naruto, but the moments it had were just as hype because of the build-up. Hitman Reborn was a show where a mismatched group of people became more than family, and they would end up being people who would honestly want to die for each other. They were kids and acted like it, yeah, but they always had pasts they would actually follow and move away from if they felt it went against their character. Tuna would cry, but he would put the fear of God in his enemies when his eyes relaxed, his voice got monotone, and his gloves were on fire. This is a show that I absolutely love almost everything about, from characters to fights, training arcs, music, lessons, and even sometimes the pacing. Now if you haven't watched it yet, go do that now. If you have, watch it again. Oh, and YouTube thinks you might enjoy this video right here.